Hello everyone, my name is Noah and welcome to this Oracle deck first look and flip through. Today we are going to be looking at the Seed and Sickle Oracle deck by Fez Inkwright. I have not yet opened it yet, so we're going to do that right now. This is an Oracle deck that I have been considering purchasing on and off for quite a while, and I finally decided I was going to do it. I saw it at Barnes & Noble, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to get it. So it says, one to wither, one to grow. One for the she, and one for the crow. And it's magnetic. It's pretty fancy. I love this sort of mystical, mysterious plant life. I wanted specifically a plant or animal-based oracle that I could use in some of my readings, specific type of readings coming up in my life. So this is a pretty thick box here as well, and you can see there are two little guidebooks and the card deck. This cost an amount I can't remember, $26.95 US. And if I remember correctly, there are two guidebooks and there are two ways you can look at these cards. So we have the Dusk guidebook and the Dawn guidebook. It's really pretty. I like that a lot. So I thought maybe my cat was in here. I'm hearing noises. So we're going to just set all this over here for now. And we're going to take the cards out of this. We're not going to flip through them just yet. I do want to feel the cardstock and the size. It's an interesting texture. It's almost not kind of sticky. There's glue on this one from that plastic band. That's okay. I can just wipe it off with my finger. Thankfully it doesn't feel like it's going to be on there forever. But it's a very almost tacky cardstock. My corner's chipped. That might be a me thing, though. That might not be the fault of the manufacturer or the packaging. I don't know. But it's definitely not a cardstock that's going to go flying, I don't think, when you're shuffling. I can tell that the cards slide against each other all right, but it's not super slippery. In the Seed and Sickle deck, each card can be read in two ways, the Dawn and the Dusk, providing advice for every reader whether you're actively working towards a goal or focusing on your mental well-being. This booklet contains the Dawn readings for the cards, perfect for if you're starting a new project, building new relationships, or focusing on revitalizing yourself. If you're looking for guidance on how to best take care of your body and mind, open the Dusk booklet for a more holistic reading. Okay, and it just says the same thing here. I was wondering if they had any different text to describe the deck. Wow, this is very fancy. Look at this. You have the forward and the introduction, but look at these pages with the illustrations. That's amazing. Alright, what does the forward say? Used for everything from sustenance to healing to protection, nothing quite has the versatility of plants. Therefore, it's no wonder that plants make endless appearances in our myths, folklore, and even daily conversations. In myths, they explain the construction of the world and cosmos. Trees hold up the world, flood the earth with the first waters, and contain all knowledge. In folklore, they explain the rules of the land, God's blood that made poison leaves, goddess bodies that make grains, and sister plants that always grow together. In our daily lives, they explain our emotions. Flowers for love, flowers for grief, and flowers for relaxation. Stories about plants have been used to pass on cultural histories. They have been used to pass on advice and warnings intergenerationally, and they have been used as symbols of resistance, love, and hope. In essence, plants have tremendous meaning to us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Fez Inkwright has taken this vast world of knowledge and placed it beautifully into the palm of your hand. With delicate lines and striking colors, Inkwright has perfectly captured the subtle whispers of a bud and the bold energy of a full bloom. Inkwright's words build upon the visual experience and provide the reader with a concise look into some of the wisdom contained within each plant. Altogether, the Seed and Sickle will provide readers with a plethora of new insights and appreciation for internal as well as external world. In the Dusk readings of the cards, Inkwright captures the energy of the Japanese saying, Kogoro ishi ni koke musazu, or a rolling stone gathers no moss. Though the wording is the same as the English saying, in Japanese its meaning is the exact opposite. These readings are for stillness, self-reflection, and stability, and an inward projected energy. Familiar plants have new meanings in the dim light of the rising moon, and the cards teach lessons about recovery, mindfulness, and letting the moss grow peacefully. Take a deep breath, focus on what you'd like to ask the cards, and let nature guide you. Yoshi Yoshitani, Tarot of the Divine. And it goes into an introduction. And then we have a quick reading guide, so it looks like there's maybe a sentence for each card. And it does look like things are perhaps divided into seasons. And we talk a little bit about the card in general, and then we move into the spring season. I'm going to see what it says in the introduction here. So it's the same down to here, and it starts the same, but it goes slightly differently then. In the dawn readings of these cards, Inkwright captures the energy of the English saying, "A rolling stone gathers no moss." These readings are for movement, change, and new beginnings, and outward projected energy. Familiar plants have new meanings in the first rays of the sun, and the cards teach lessons about growth, productivity, and not letting moss encumber you. Take a deep breath and focus on what you'd like to ask the cards, and let nature guide you. Also by Yoshi Yoshitani, Tarot of the Divine. And we have the introduction again, and the quick reading guide, again, with different meanings. And it does go through the seasons in the same way. And it talks about the cards, again, into spring, and then the seeds. So it looks like the cards are in the same order, regardless of which guidebook you use, which is great. And I think now we can get into it. I am noticing it says it's 55 cards, and that isn't quite a card a week. But I feel like you could very interestingly go through starting with the first day of spring and work your way through maybe picking certain weeks of the year, maybe solstice weeks or something, to have an extra card, or equinoxes or something. I think that could be a very interesting way to work with this deck, to just go through it over the course of a year. But the first card we have is the seed, and it's not just the seed. There are the roots and the leaves, and it's, you know, I feel like this is a very as above, so below energy. That sort of, you know, what's under the soil is also happening above, but one may be more visible than the other. I do like the sun here. It kind of reminds us that we need something to create energy. We can't create from nothing. The backs are absolutely gorgeous. They almost blend in a little too well with this background. We have one, which is birch. I like the string. I wonder what the significance of that is. I could look. Let's see if it says. And I'm sure it'll say different in the next one as well. But let's take a moment to look at these gorgeous pages. It says, in Irish communities, the traditional winter Yule log is cut from the birch tree. A broom of birch twigs is used to brush out the dust of the old year and bring in the new. And household fires are doused, then relit from the central Yule fire to bring the community together. You are facing a new beginning, but do not embark on this future alone. You'll have a stronger start if you rely on your friends, family, or colleagues to support you through your first steps. Do not fear removing what is past its use. All right, now let's see what the Dusk guidebook says, just for funsies, so we can see how they're kind of different. That's the seed. Here we go. So it's the same illustrations, more or less, and it says, the birch tree is beloved by many for its pure but determined energy. It is one of the first trees to grow leaves in the spring, and the first to grow back when an area of woodland is cleared. This tenacity gives strength to anyone seeking to overcome difficulties. The birch is also featured in the Celtic Ogham tree calendar. The month it represents is seen as a time for regeneration and rebirth. This card is encouraging you to focus on all of these things. A new chapter is beginning for you, potentially one that has arisen from a challenging situation. Do not let past difficulties make you jaded. Enter this new phase with certainty and confidence. So now we have an idea of how the different interpretations work. And we have Lily of the Valley. This kind of reminds me of the myth of Loki and Sigyn, because the Lily of the Valley plant is toxic, I think, to humans. I know to pets. Definitely. I'm pretty sure it is. So the idea of something dripping off of a plant that's poisonous into a bowl, well, if you know the myth, Sigyn holds up a bowl and collects the poison to try and protect Loki. It's from a snake, not a plant, but that's something that I'm initially seeing here. We have bracken. Interesting. This is the first I suppose this bowl isn't a plant, but this is the first card that has any sort of human in it. I mean, it's just a hand, but it's someone's hand is up. It's interesting. It almost looks like the hand's being sewn back together. I think it's just more of an abstract line. This kind of makes me think of a thread and a needle, but yeah, it's really pretty. I like how much the stark black of the hand stands out, but they use the lines to define parts of it. You have the fingertip pads and the palm, like the meat of the palm, the heel of the palm. Interesting. And we have Wisteria. That color palette is lovely. Honestly, I really like all of these color palettes. We have Buttercup. It's interesting playing with negative space here. We have Poppy with a skull. That's interesting. I suppose Poppy is associated with what can be made from it, and that can bring death, and I'm sure there are other reasons too, but that's what I'm initially thinking of. Beautiful and haunting. We have 7, which is the cherry. That's very appropriate for this time of year. I do enjoy that there's a bird in here. It's very... it brings a little more into it. We have Magnolia. I like the sort of blocky, almost tonal designs, but then the more you look, there are more little details drawn with thin lines, which I think they mentioned in the guidebook in the introduction. We have Chickweed with a snake. Now, I am not usually a huge fan of snakes, but I do genuinely like the color and the way it's intertwined in the plants. And I think it would be very interesting to, and the guidebook might mention this, but I think it'd be very interesting to go through each plant, marking whether they're edible or not, that sort of thing, and then comparing it to the meanings in the deck. And you could also do that with medicinal uses, but I think that the edible versus not edible would be very interesting. And you can also throw the cards around. This is really pretty. I wonder what the significance of this is. I do like that design there with the colors that really stands out. We have Cornflower. I kind of like the darkness of this because I feel like Cornflower is usually associated with bright blue skies and sunny days, so this sort of almost darker color palette makes it much more interesting because it's not what we always see in association with this flower. We have Pimpernel, and we have a compass in the middle. So I would think this card is perhaps having something to do with direction and finding your way, that sort of thing. We have Oak. Ooh, I really like this. This reminds me of the tower, which I suppose might be intentional. And the lightning is actually striking the acorn. You can see it's going into it rather than just behind it. And this is number 13, so I suppose unlucky 13. That's very pretty. I like it. Tulips. Kind of rising towards the sun or the moon, I suppose. We have Moonwort. I've never heard of that, actually. That's interesting. There's a key. I wonder if this is the same thing as Mugwort. The leaves look very similar. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. Lavender, and it looks like a little perfume vial. That is definitely something lavender is known for, its scent. We have Bluebell with a book shot through with 2 arrows. That's fascinating. Interesting. So maybe knowledge. I don't know. Foxglove. That's really pretty. I like the echo of them up here in the line work. I don't know if you can see that. I'll hold it up. Hopefully you'll be able to focus on that and see. So it's got the actual flowers, and then you have the white lines up at the top of the card that create almost like echoes or shadows of them. And then we have clover, and I do see there is at least one 4-leaf clover in here. There's one, there's one, there's one. So that definitely implies luck, whatnot. You've got the flowers. I think these might be dewdrops, that sort of thing. The sun is reflecting perhaps down on it, and it is really just, reflecting back up. We have belladonna, and you've got a bird of some kind. I think it might be a falcon. I don't know. It kind of looks like a chicken, but it's definitely not a chicken. who has a crown, and we have these snips. It's a type of scissors. I use them when I'm sewing to snip threads. That's very interesting. I suppose belladonna could be used to snip the thread of your life if you're going with Greek mythology, the fates. They weave and spin and all that. So yeah, that's very interesting. And then, wow, look. We go from scissors to something making thread, and this kind of reminds me of the thread that was in the birch tree. This is rowan, and this looks like a shuttle, which is something you can use when you're weaving. So that's very interesting. We have clemati, I think is how you pronounce it. It's French, I don't know. It's very pretty. Again, we're back to just the plant itself without all the details or the extra bits, which I think is just as significant as having those extra details in the cards. We have willow, and it almost looks like it's creating an infinity loop or a Mobius strip. Of course, that's not quite what it's doing. It is in a knot. If you were to pull, it would make a knot. But I think that's very interesting and obviously symbolic. There's rain, which kind of brings in the idea of a weeping willow. We have basil. Well, that's interesting. It's interesting because yesterday was the Ides of March when I'm filming this. Today's the 16th of March, and that makes me think of Caesar. But yeah, there are so many different types of basil. This kind of looks like purple basil. It could just be a lighting thing, but I love basil. Basil is one of my favorite herbs, so it makes me happy to see it in here. I think it might be fun to go through this deck and the Dirt Gems Oracle, which I have also talked about on this channel, and compare the similar, like if there are, for example, I believe there's basil in that deck too. You could compare the two basil cards and interpretations. I think that would be fun. We have Daisy. They're all kind of reaching for that sun or moon imagery there. That's really pretty. I also have the Herbal Tarot, which you could compare this to as well. And I remembered that because I know for a fact that hops, which this is an option in that deck, is a card in that deck. It's really pretty. I don't actually know what hops look like when they're fresh. I've seen them dried out. But I don't know. I would assume they're green, so I don't really know, but it's interesting. It's not a plant I know a whole lot about. We have hawthorn. I like how the blooms and the leaves are separate from the tree itself. That's a very interesting choice. Rather than just showing a tree with the blooms on it, they sort of, create the border and a lot closer up. And then you have that tree further away. You get that silhouette. And again, there are more of those little light white lines here. I don't know if you can see them on camera, but they're creating those echoes or ghosts almost of the illustration of the plants in the illustration. And then we have feverfew, again with hands. And I think this is interesting because I think this is something that has been used historically for medicinal use. So, humans have interacted with it a lot. And I think that, makes it interesting. When you see the hands there, that kind of shows that relationship between humans and the plant. I could be completely wrong. I could be thinking of a different plant, but I think this plant has been used medicinally from what I know. We have mustard. I've seen this card before. I feel like I've seen this card somewhere before, maybe for their like marketing or something. It's interesting. I was gonna say, I almost said there are no plants in this picture, but that's not true. The blooms and the leaves are all around here, but I'm so focused on the cup that I didn't really see them. I wonder if that says something about mustard as a plant. We have number 30, asphodel. That's pretty. They look kind of like the hops. So I suppose when they say fields of asphodel in Greek mythology, they're talking about fields full of this plant, as a mythological place in the afterlife. And we have mushroom, and this kind of makes me sad because there's so many different types of mushrooms. It feels like, it should have like the name of the type of the mushroom here. And mushrooms aren't actually plants, so that's interesting. I do like this card, though. It is very beautiful with the phases of the moon and the way everything is mirrored. I really like it. I wonder, or I'm a little bit sad that the author did not take that opportunity to go into a specific mushroom. And then we have oleander, which I know is a very toxic plant. That's really pretty. I do like the snake. That kind of brings back the snake we saw earlier. And of course, you know, snakes are associated often with poison because snakes can be venomous, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's really pretty. And I really kind of like the ghostly nature of the snake. It does have, it looks like a rattle. So it is a venomous snake, a rattlesnake. We have dandelion, which is one of my favorites, personally. Love me a good dandelion. And there's a crown again. We saw the crown imagery before. And we have the different life stages of the dandelion, which is pretty neat. It's a very dynamic card. There's a lot of movement going on. Not all of the cards seem to have that, but that one definitely does. Then we have Elder, and we have the tree, separate from the blooms and the foliage again, but this time the tree is in the front, and there's a hand there. It's kind of creepy. I think it might be supposed to be. I like that. It's kind of unsettling in a fun way. It has the same sort of lines that the other hand we looked at the beginning had. I forget which card that was. Then we have Ivy. Ivy is one of the banes of my existence, at least the plant is. It's because there's a lot of English ivy where I live, and it's not native to this area, and it's very invasive, so I spent a lot of time removing it. So that's one way that my own life informs my interpretation of the cards, which is one of my favorite things, is to hear how people interpret cards based on their own life experiences. We have ragwort. They're little caterpillars. That's so cute. We have thistle, and it's interesting. They're growing upside down in terms of the orientation of the card. Thistles will forever make me think of Eeyore. We have crocus, which is, again, has something that is not a plant or an animal or a fungi in it. And another one of those non-living details, I suppose. Accessories, maybe? I like the eye there. That's interesting. It's really pretty. Then we have strawberry, and I think this might be one of my favorite cards. I really, really like this. I can imagine this being blown up as a print and putting it in my kitchen. So we have blackthorn here, and you'll have to let me know. I'm noticing a color palette shift. If the color palette shifts maybe about every 10 cards, if you notice that as I was flipping through them, I didn't notice that. But it's really pretty. I really do like this darker color palette. Again, we have the hand with the lines. I do like the gradient as well. That's very interesting. And then we have rose. And I really, really very much like this card because it is not at all the color palette you would expect for a rose. Normally you expect pinks and reds and maybe a little bit of green. Very bright, very pretty, very sweet. But here we have, you know, this dark, dark brown that's almost black. We have the orangey yellows, the reds that are, you know, very, very muted. They're not what you typically think of. And then we have the rosary as well. And I actually learned recently the reason it's called a rosary is because the beads were originally made out of rose petals that had been like mushed together and boiled. I don't really remember the specific process, but I do know that that is why it's called a rosary. I think that's interesting. Then we have a verbana, and we have what looks like maybe an eel and a bird of some kind, along with, it looks like almost like antlers. They could be branches, but they look very much like antlers. And the flowers here. I'm getting a sort of, not quite psychedelic, but like mystical, astral, magical realism-y vibe from this card. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense, but I kind of want to almost dive into it and look at it and just see what I can see. And then we have alder with a bird, and it looks like a wisp of some kind, and the leaves, and are those perhaps berries or cone, like pine cone almost? I don't know what type of tree an alder is. I'm getting a sense of perhaps inspiration or hypnosis almost. And then we have bramble, which again we have the red thread, but it has been spun into like maybe a piece of yarn or a piece of rope wrapped around the flowers, almost like it's making a bouquet. That's really pretty. And then we have citrus, again, very broad. It's not an orange, it's a citrus. So I wonder if that's by design. And we have the red thread throughout as well. And now we have aconite, which again I know is toxic. So we have images of death here. We have a key, an arrow, looks like perhaps a ram or an antelope's skull, and the flowers itself. I am really vibing with this color palette. I like it a lot. We have holly, and we have a little bird who's singing, and this is kind of perhaps his song. It goes back to the card we were talking about earlier that had this. I think it was... These are all not the right way around. Yes, it was alder. It has that same sort of design almost. So it's almost like they're talking. And we have mistletoe, like that bird. I wonder if it mentions what type of bird it is. Swords, which is interesting because a lot of modern mythology says that mistletoe has to do with kissing, so that's an interesting change. And we have chamomile. It's really pretty, very glowy. I love that. It's amazing when artists can take color and make things look like they're glowing when it's just color, you know, there's no lights in it physically. That's amazing. We have mandrake. Again, the threads, but this time it's yellow. And it almost looks like the body of the mandrake is made out of those red threads almost. And the flowers. It's nice because I feel like a lot of times mandrake at least focus solely on the roots and the fact that it looks like a body, all of that. And we don't really give as much attention to the flowers or the leaves. And then we have henbane, more thread, almost like raindrops, and the crown comes back. We have datura. This is almost like a crown as well. It's really pretty. I'm getting that more pink vibe, pink and blue. We have apple. I like that they include the seeds, but not in such an explicit way. It's, you know, sort of the sun, but it's definitely supposed to be the seeds, and they sit in that pattern within the apple. And then we have the sickle is number 54. So it went from 0 to 54. Very interesting. I wonder if that mark is intentional or if it's a defect. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards defect, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to make me not want to use the deck. So there you have it. That's the Seed and Sickle Oracle and the two guidebooks. I feel like this might be a little bit of a gimmick because you could definitely perhaps combine these into one. A lot of people who write tarot guidebooks will include both the upright and the reversed meaning for cards, which is sort of the same vibe here, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the orientation of the card. It's more of your intent. So these are neat, but it feels like maybe a little bit of a gimmick. I do like the cards. The artwork is gorgeous. I really think that these will be fun to play with. I can't wait to read about these plants. Like I said, I think it would be fun to compare different decks I have that are plant-based to see both how they're drawn and how they're interpreted. It's a good cardstock. It's like a medium thickness, I would say. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart, but it is kind of sticky. I don't know if it's just because my hands are a little sweaty or if it is just the way it is. But they do, you know, move around nicely. You don't have to worry about them sticking together, but I don't think they're going to go flying when you try to shuffle. I don't riffle shuffle. I just usually waterfall shuffle. And as always, I'm going to draw a card, and you can do with that what you will. But I think it's a nice little tradition, way to break in the deck without, you know, actually breaking. We'll go with this one that was sticking out. We have the Seed. How very appropriate for the beginning of using this deck. So that's the flip through. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got a little bit of a feel for what this deck is and my thoughts on it. I usually mention in the beginning that I am an artist as well as someone who reads tarot, and I really enjoy getting to look at it both from the perspective of someone who uses cards as well as an artist who enjoys seeing how other people draw things. I would like to create a tarot deck or an oracle deck. Actually, I have ideas for both, but I would like to create those someday, so this also gives me inspiration and helps me learn more about the various divination systems, whether it be tarot or oracle. And yeah, I hope that this gave you a little bit of an idea of whether maybe you want to purchase this deck, maybe you'd like to borrow it from a friend, maybe it's not for you at all. whatever the case may be, I hope this helped you come to that decision. So if you'd like to like or dislike the video, follow me, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that silliness, be sure to do that. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And thank you for spending a little bit of time in the Stet Studio with me today. Bye!